There's something about lighthouses that makes people uneasy. Maybe it's the isolation, the way they sit at the edge of the world, battered by storms, with nothing but the endless ocean stretching out in front of them. Maybe it's the silence, broken only by waves slamming against the rocks and the low groan of the foghorn echoing across the water. But sometimes it's not the sea you need to be afraid of. On the jagged coast of Maine, there's a lighthouse that hasn't been in use for nearly 80 years. The locals call it Blackthorn Light. Official records say it was decommissioned in 1946 after a violent storm destroyed much of the structure. What the records don't say is what happened to the last keeper. He was a quiet man, lived alone in that tower for nearly 20 years, keeping the lamp burning every night without fail. Then, one winter evening, the lamp went dark. A supply boat went out to check on him, but when the crew reached the island, the lighthouse was empty. His dinner was still warm on the table, his boots by the door, his logbook left open as though he had stepped out for just a moment and never returned. People still argue about what really happened. Some say he went mad from the solitude and threw himself into the sea. Others whisper he saw something that called to him from the water. But there's a darker version of the story, one that says he never left at all, that his shadow still walks the spiral staircase of the tower, lantern in hand, waiting for anyone foolish enough to set foot inside. And tonight, we're going to step inside Blackthorn Light, not through old photographs or rumors, but through the story of a man who dared to spend one night there, determined to uncover the truth. This isn't just a ghost story, it's a descent into loneliness, obsession, and the kind of silence that can drive you insane. This is the Lighthouse Keeper's Secret.
The story begins with a man named Daniel Price. 35 years old, a freelance journalist, the kind of guy who thrives on mystery stories that nobody else wants to touch. He's not famous, not rich, just hungry for that one big piece that could finally make his name stand out in a world of endless articles and blogs. When he first heard about Blackthorn Light, it was in a half-drunken conversation at a fisherman's bar in Portland, Maine. A gray-bearded man leaned in close, eyes darting toward the door as if someone might overhear. The keeper didn't leave. Don't believe that part. He's still in there. I saw him once. A lantern swaying through the glass. Storm night. No power on that island, but the light was burning. That was all it took for Daniel. He booked a small boat, rented old survival gear, and arranged with a local captain to drop him off at the island and return the next morning. Just one night. That was the deal. The boat ride. The day he set out, the sea was restless. Not a full storm, but the kind of weather that makes you feel like the ocean is whispering warnings. The sky hung heavy with dark gray clouds, the wind sharp enough to sting his face. The old fishing boat groaned against the swells, every wave slapping its wooden frame like a warning he should have listened to. Daniel sat near the bow, clutching his duffel bag, a flashlight, batteries, a camera, a digital recorder, and a notebook. He also carried a flask of whiskey, not for courage, but because he knew nights like this could stretch long and empty. The captain barely spoke, just kept his eyes fixed on the horizon, jaw clenched tight around a toothpick. After nearly an hour of silence, he finally muttered, "Don't stay too close to the water when night falls. That's when you'll hear it." Daniel wanted to ask what he would hear, but the captain didn't say another word. First glimpse of the lighthouse. As the island came into view, Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Blackthorn Light rose from the jagged rocks like a black tooth, its once white paint stained with decades of storms. The lantern room at the top was shattered. glass teeth jutting out, rust dripping down the frame. The island itself was small, barely a strip of land with twisted pine trees clinging to thin soil. The shoreline was nothing but sharp rocks and black seaweed that looked like writhing hands in the surf. And then there was the silence. No gulls, no seals, not even the hum of insects, just the slap of waves and the low groan of the boat engine. The closer they came, the more Daniel swore he could feel it, the weight of something pressing down on the place. Stepping onto the island, the boat bumped against a slick wooden dock, rotted with age. The captain didn't tie it off, didn't step onto the dock, didn't even look up. He just jerked his chin at Daniel. "The sun comes up at 6. Be here waiting. If you're not—" He didn't finish. He just spat into the sea and turned his eyes away. Daniel hauled his duffel bag over his shoulder and stepped onto the dock. The wood creaked under his weight, wet and soft, as though it might collapse any second. By the time he turned back to look at the boat, the captain was already reversing, heading back toward the mainland without a wave or a word. And then Daniel was alone. The lighthouse towered above him, a silhouette against the bruised sky. He could smell salt and rust, could hear the wind whistling through broken shutters. Each step up the path toward the tower felt heavier than the last, as though the island didn't want him there. Inside the lighthouse, first impressions. The door was swollen with moisture but unlocked. It groaned open, revealing a narrow entry hall lined with peeling paint and water stains. The smell hit him first: mildew, old seaweed, and something faintly metallic, like rust mixed with blood. The air was colder inside, damp, heavy. His flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a spiral staircase twisting upward into darkness. Beside it, an old logbook sat on a wooden stand, its pages warped, but still legible. He brushed dust off the cover and read the first line written in careful, neat handwriting. December 12th, 1946. The sea is calling tonight. A chill crawled up his spine. He set his bag down, clicked on his recorder, and said aloud, "This is Daniel Price, Blackthorn Light, December 3rd, 2025, beginning my overnight investigation." His voice echoed strangely in the empty chamber, as if the walls swallowed sound instead of bouncing it back. The first hour. For the next half hour, Daniel explored the ground floor. Rusted tools in a corner, broken lanterns, a small iron stove with ash still clinging to the grate. He found a chair knocked over, a mug shattered on the floor. Everything felt left mid-motion, as though someone had been interrupted in the middle of an ordinary evening. Every so often, he thought he heard something: a shuffle on the staircase, a whisper carried on the wind that slipped through the cracks. Once he swore he felt a vibration through the floor, like a low hum rising from the sea itself. By the time the sky outside dimmed to a steel-blue twilight, Daniel realized he hadn't spoken in nearly an hour. He'd just been listening, waiting. And that's when he heard it, faint, distant, carried on the wind. The sound of a lantern swinging, a faint clink of metal against glass. From upstairs.
Daniel froze where he stood, the faint metallic clink of glass swinging somewhere above him. The sound was so soft, it could have been mistaken for the building settling, or the wind brushing against loose metal. But Daniel knew the rhythm of ordinary sounds. This wasn't that. This was deliberate, almost patterned. He shined his flashlight toward the spiral staircase. The iron steps wound upward in a tight circle, the kind that makes you dizzy if you stare too long. The beam caught flecks of rust, dust, dancing like ash in the air. The sound had stopped now, leaving nothing but his own breathing. Daniel spoke into his recorder, his voice low, almost whispering. 42 minutes in, heard what sounded like a lantern swinging, no visual confirmation yet, preparing to check the upper level. He clicked the recorder off, tucked it into his jacket, and gripped the railing. The iron was ice cold, damp with condensation. Each step groaned beneath his weight, the metal vibrating faintly like the tower itself was alive and didn't appreciate the intrusion. The climb. The climb was slow. The flashlight beam barely illuminated more than a few steps ahead, so each turn of the staircase felt like walking into a mouth that never ended. He counted steps aloud just to keep his mind steady. 22, 23, 24. At step 30, he paused. The air grew colder, heavy with a faint smell of oil, lantern oil, unmistakable and out of place in a place that hadn't seen flame in decades. His stomach tightened. He aimed the light upward. For the briefest second, he thought he saw it. A shadow gliding across the stairwell above him. Thin, tall, carrying something that caught the light before vanishing around the curve. The beam flickered. His hand shook. He told himself it was just nerves. But the silence felt different now. Thicker. Expectant. The keeper's room. Finally, he reached the first landing, the keeper's quarters. The door stood half open, the wood swollen from years of dampness. He pushed it gently, the hinges shrieking in protest. The room inside was small, barely large enough for a bed, a dresser, and a writing desk facing a narrow window. Everything was coated in dust, but oddly, the bed was still made. The quilt stretched tight, the pillow neatly placed. Too neat. On the desk lay another logbook, smaller than the one downstairs. Its leather cover was cracked, the edges curling. He flipped it open. The first entries were mundane. Weather reports, supply deliveries, notes about fishing boats passing by. But then, a shift. December 2nd. 1946. The sea is louder tonight. Not the waves, something beneath them. I hear it even when I close my ears. He flipped forward. December 6th, 1946. The lantern swung by itself for the third night in a row. I tied it down. It still moved. Another page. The writing grew shaky. December 10th, 1946. It knocked on the glass of the lantern room 3 times, like a man asking to be let in. Daniel felt his chest tighten. His fingers brushed the edge of the page. The final entry was scrawled, almost illegible. December 12th. The sea is calling tonight. I cannot... The sentence broke off. Ink smeared across the paper like the pen had been pulled from his hand mid-word. The first knock. Daniel stood there, heart hammering, when a sound cut through the silence. Knock. From above. He jerked his head upward toward the ceiling. The sound had been sharp, heavy, unmistakable, like knuckles against glass. He turned off his recorder almost without thinking. No need for words now. He stood in the center of the room, his flashlight sweeping across the corners. The bed. The dresser. The desk. Nothing moved. Then again. Knock. Knock. This time slower, deliberate, like someone waiting for him to answer. It came from the lantern room above. The choice. Daniel's mouth was dry. Every rational thought told him to turn around, head back down the staircase, wait until dawn on the dock. But he knew he wouldn't. He'd come here for this, hadn't he? To find the story behind the whispers? To uncover the truth the town refused to tell? He grabbed his recorder again, his voice a rasp. 1 hour, 12 minutes. Confirmed knocking sounds from the lantern room above, repeating, regular intervals. Investigating further. He shoved the recorder away, steadied his breath, and stepped back into the stairwell. The iron spiraled higher, vanishing into the dark like a throat waiting to swallow him. Each step upward carried the weight of the unknown. His light wavered, the shadows seemed to stretch, and that smell, oil, salt, rust, thickened. The knocking continued, steady, patient. By the time he reached the next turn of the staircase, he realized something chilling. The knocks weren't random. They were in threes, always threes. Just like the last entry in the logbook had said, 3 knocks, asking to be let in.
Daniel's hand tightened around the railing as the spiral staircase narrowed, every step vibrating beneath his boots like a plucked wire. The knocking above him hadn't stopped. It came slow, deliberate, 3 strikes at a time, echoing down the hollow core of the tower. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. Then it would start again. His breath fogged in the air, though the night outside wasn't cold enough for frost. He clicked his recorder back on, whispering, Hour 3. Knocking continues from the lantern chamber. Pattern is consistent. Always 3. Feels almost conversational. He hated how his voice trembled at the end. At the door. The lantern room door was ahead now, a heavy iron slab with a round handle, rust running down its seams like dried blood. Daniel paused, the flashlight beam trembling slightly. The smell here was stronger than ever. Oil, yes, but also brine, like seawater trapped for years. He pressed his ear against the cold metal. Nothing. Silence so deep he could hear his own pulse. He started to think the knocks had stopped, that maybe he'd imagined it, when the door vibrated against his skull. Knock, knock, knock. This time so close it rattled his teeth. Daniel stumbled back, heart hammering. The recorder caught his ragged breath. He forced himself to laugh, a short, nervous bark that didn't sound human in the empty tower. He reached for the handle. It was ice cold, slick with condensation. The lantern chamber. The door groaned open, hinges screaming like something long asleep being wrenched awake. His flashlight cut across the room, circular, high-ceilinged, lined with shattered glass panes where the beacon once shone. Rusted gears and machinery set motionless, the lamp itself a broken carcass in the center. And yet, the room wasn't empty. From the ceiling, hanging by a rusted chain, swayed an old oil lantern. Its glass was intact, its flame impossibly lit. The glow wasn't steady. It pulsed faintly as if beating in rhythm with the knocks. The lantern swung gently back and forth, though there was no breeze, no draft, nothing to move it. Daniel's throat went dry. There's a lantern here, lit. That's impossible. There's no fuel, no keeper, but it's burning. He moved closer, the beam of his flashlight catching the way the flame curled, not upward, but sideways, reaching towards him. The reflection. The lantern's glow washed across the broken glass panes, throwing fractured light across the chamber. For a second, Daniel saw something in the reflections. Not his own face. Another man. Thin, gaunt, eyes sunken deep in shadow. A beard streaked with white, clothes ragged and water-stained. He stood behind him in the glass, lantern in hand. His mouth opened and closed silently, like he was mouthing words Daniel couldn't hear. Daniel spun around. Nothing. Just the empty chamber, the swaying lantern. When he looked back at the glass, the reflection was still there, staring. And then, with slow, deliberate clarity, the figure lifted a hand and pressed it against the inside of the reflection. His palm smeared across the glass as though it was soft, malleable. The sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time so close it rattled his teeth.
Daniel stumbled back, clutching the recorder. His voice came out strangled. There's someone here. I can hear. The flame flared bright. The room shuddered with the sound of metal groaning, wood shifting, and through the pulsing light came a voice, not in the air, not in his ears, but deep in his chest. You opened the door. Daniel staggered back, clutching the recorder. His voice came out strangled. There's someone here. I can hear. The flame snapped higher, the glass panes vibrating. The reflection in the broken windows pressed both hands flat, face twisted with desperate hunger. You shouldn't have come. The lantern swung harder now, chain groaning, light slicing across the chamber in dizzying arcs. Every swing seemed to warp the room, bending the walls inward, stretching the shadows longer. Daniel's knees buckled. He dropped to the cold floor, palms scraping against salt crystals scattered across the iron plates. Salt. In a lighthouse. He realized it wasn't decay. It had been placed there. A line. A circle. A ward. And he had stepped inside it. Daniel crawled back, breath shallow, eyes locked on the lantern as the knocks grew louder, faster, shaking the chamber like a drum. And through it all, the reflection's mouth finally formed words he could understand. 3 words, clear, terrifying. Light the sea.
Daniel stayed crouched on the cold floor of the lantern chamber, the hum of the flame drilling into his chest. The 3 words still echoed inside him like an aftershock. Light the sea. His mind scrambled for logic. What did it mean? The sea didn't need light. The lighthouse was dead, decommissioned for decades. And yet here he was, watching a lantern sway in a room no one had touched in 80 years. The flame pulsed again. Once. Twice. 3 times. And each time he swore he felt the tower itself shiver. The circle of salt. Daniel crawled backward until his hand brushed the line of salt scattered across the iron floor. At first he thought it was random decay, but now he saw it clearly. A rough circle, uneven but deliberate, ringing the base of the lantern. He leaned close, the recorder trembling in his hand. There's a ring of salt here, surrounding the lantern. It wasn't natural. Someone put it here. A ward, a barrier. I think he tried to trap something. The words caught in his throat. Tried, not succeeded, because whatever it was still here. The reflection in the broken glass twitched, face pressed hard against the pane as though straining to break through. The beard, the hollow eyes, the lips moving silently. When Daniel squinted, he realized the figure wasn't alone anymore. Other faces crowded behind him, blurred, watery, as if submerged in the glass itself. Men, women, children, mouths open in silent screams. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own bag. The sea's reply. And then came the sound from outside. A low, rolling boom. Not thunder. Too steady. It came again, deeper this time, vibrating through the floor. Daniel crawled to the shattered window and shined his light over the cliffs. The ocean he'd crossed only hours earlier was no longer calm. Waves rose unnaturally high, slamming into the rocks with the weight of fists. The spray shot upward in bursts, catching the light like shards of glass. And then beneath it, he saw something worse. Light. Not lightning, not reflection, but a faint glow pulsing from beneath the sea. 3 pulses. Then stillness, exactly like the lantern flame. His breath fogged the cracked glass. His voice broke as he whispered into the recorder. The sea it's glowing. I don't know how else to say it. It's answering the lantern. The keeper's log. Desperate for reason, Daniel snatched the smaller logbook from the desk and flipped back through its pages. The writing was jagged near the end, as though the keeper's hand had trembled uncontrollably. One passage made his stomach drop. If the sea answers, the gate is open. Salt holds it back. If the line breaks, it climbs. His eyes darted to the circle around the lantern. Crystals shifted, some blown loose by the draft from the broken windows. Tiny gaps, breaks in the line. And the flame swayed harder now, as if it knew it. The first voice. The knock came again. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, it wasn't against the glass. It came from the spiral staircase behind him. He spun, the flashlight beam cutting down the iron steps. Empty. Shadows coiled and uncoiled like smoke. His ears rang with the silence that followed. And then, clear as day, a voice whispered just over his shoulder. "Help me carry it." Daniel whipped around. Nothing. Just the lantern swaying in its broken circle of salt, flame stretching sideways like a hand reaching for him. He backed toward the door. His legs shook so badly he thought they might give out. He half stumbled, half ran down the staircase, his boots clanging like gunshots in the silence. Back in the keeper's quarters. He collapsed into the keeper's quarters, chest heaving. The smell of brine followed him, stronger now, like the sea itself had seeped into the walls. His flashlight flickered, dimming to a thin glow. Daniel pressed the recorder to his lips, forcing the words out. 1 hour past midnight. The lantern it's connected to the sea. Whatever's trapped up there, it's still alive. I don't think I'm alone in this tower, not anymore. The room creaked, floorboards shifting under invisible weight. Something brushed the back of his neck, cold, damp, like wet rope. He spun, light slicing across the room. Empty. On the desk, the logbook flipped open on its own, pages fluttering before slamming to a stop. Daniel leaned close, breath shallow. 3 words scrawled across the page in fresh ink. Light the sea. The night grew long. For the next hour, Daniel sat in the chair by the desk, gripping the flashlight with white knuckles, listening. Every creak of the tower, every distant crash of the waves, every faint knock echoing from above. The lantern flame never went out, and the glow beneath the sea pulsed back in answer. Steady, patient, waiting. And Daniel knew with bone-deep certainty this was only the beginning. Daniel didn't sleep, not even for a second. He sat hunched at the keeper's desk, the weak glow of his flashlight haloing the open logbook. The words, "Light the sea," burned into his brain. He repeated them silently, trying to wring meaning out of them, as though repetition might soften the edges of terror. But outside, the ocean roared louder with each passing minute. The waves crashed against the cliffs like fists pounding on a locked door. Spray rattled the broken window, mist creeping into the room, coating his lips with the bitter sting of salt. The air was thick, too thick, like the atmosphere inside the lighthouse had merged with the sea outside. The glow in the water. At some point, Daniel forced himself to the window. He didn't want to look, but something, curiosity, duty, or madness, dragged him to it. The sea below writhed. Waves rose unnaturally high, curling with the grace of living things. And beneath them, the glow grew stronger. At first, it looked like a single pulsing light, but then it split into 2, then 4, then dozens, tiny orbs of pale blue, rising and sinking with the swell of the tide. The pattern was wrong, though, too even, not random like fish or currents. They pulsed, together, in rhythm, and every time they pulsed, the lantern flame above him answered. Daniel's throat tightened. His hand shook as he raised the recorder to his lips. Hour 5. The sea is alive with lights. Dozens, maybe hundreds. They're moving in unison. The lantern responds to them, or Maybe it controls them. I don't know. It's like the tower is speaking to the ocean. He stopped the recording because his voice was breaking. The logbook lay open, pages fluttering in the damp wind. His eyes caught a passage he hadn't noticed before, written in hurried strokes, the ink smudged by what looked like seawater. The lights are not stars. They are eyes. If the flame calls, they will rise. If they rise, the gate will open. Daniel's stomach turned. Eyes! The word echoed in his skull until the meaning clicked. He fumbled for the flashlight, pointed it back towards the cliffs, and stared hard at the sea. The glow wasn't under the waves. It was inside them. Shapes moved there, long, sinuous, shifting just out of sight. The lights weren't random. They were clustered, set in pairs. Eyes! Dozens of them, watching. The spiral stare again. The lantern above gave a sudden, violent swing. Its chain screeched against the ceiling as the flame flared brighter than ever before, casting the whole tower in warped shadows. Daniel staggered backward, knocking the chair over. The spiral staircase groaned. Each step flexed as though bearing weight. Something was moving down from the lantern chamber. Slow, heavy, measured. Step, silence. Step, silence. Daniel aimed his light upward, but it fizzled, dimming to a sickly yellow glow. The beam caught only the nearest few steps. Above, darkness pressed down like a solid thing. Another step. And then, knocking. Not from above this time, not from outside, from the walls themselves. Knock, knock, knock. The sound reverberated through the entire chamber, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. Daniel slapped the recorder on in panic. Something's coming down the stairs. I don't see it, but I hear it. The walls they're knocking. They're answering the sea. His words trailed off into static. The recorder spat back a voice that wasn't his. Don't break the circle. Daniel's eyes snapped to the floor where the line of salt had been laid. He'd disturbed it earlier when he'd stumbled into the lantern chamber. The circle was broken in at least 3 places now. And outside, the sea surged higher, eyes glowing brighter, shapes writhing just beneath the surface. The logbook's last legible line screamed in his head. If the line breaks, it climbs. He slammed the book shut and scrambled to the dresser, yanking drawers open, searching for anything, salt, supplies, anything the keeper might have left. Dust, mold, nothing useful. He dropped to the floor, running his palms across the cracks between boards, praying for a hidden stash. And that's when he felt it, a rough cloth pouch wedged behind the dresser leg. He tore it free. The bag was small, hand-sewn, the fabric stiff with age. Inside, salt, fine, white, dry. The flame above hissed. The footsteps on the spiral stair paused, and outside, the glowing eyes blinked in unison. Daniel clutched the pouch in both hands, whispering aloud though he didn't believe in prayer. Please, please let this work. He poured the salt back into the gaps of the circle, frantic, clumsy, his hands shaking so badly, most of it scattered wide. Still, as the line began to close, the footsteps slowed, the knocking on the walls softened to faint taps. But the sea didn't calm. The eyes remained, waiting. Daniel collapsed against the wall, sweat cold on his neck. He whispered into the recorder one last time. I think I bought myself time, but whatever's in the sea, whatever's in this tower, it's not finished. It's waiting for me to slip. The lantern swung once more, steady now, its flame dimming slightly, as if satisfied. And outside, carried faintly on the wind, came the sound of voices. Dozens of them, rising and falling, like a choir with no lungs. Daniel sat there, back pressed against the damp wall, clutching the little salt pouch like it was the last thread tethering him to the world of the living. His flashlight lay useless beside him, beam sputtering weakly.
The recorder clicked faintly in his pocket, capturing every heartbeat, every rasping breath. Outside, the voices rose. At first, it sounded like the wind, long, low moans drifting in from the sea. But the more he listened, the less it resembled weather, and the more it resembled singing. Not human singing, not exactly. The pitches were wrong, the tones bent sideways, sliding in ways no human throat could bend. Yet it was undeniably a choir. Dozens of voices swelling together carried on the waves, rising, falling, echoing against the cliffs. Daniel's stomach turned. It wasn't random, it had structure. The same notes, the same refrains repeated like a hymn. The pull of the hymn. As the sound grew louder, Daniel felt it tugging at him, not his ears but his bones. His chest vibrated with every note, his ribs rattling like thin metal. He pressed his hands against his ears, but it didn't matter. The music bypassed flesh. It went straight into him. And with it came images. He saw the sea from above, moonlight cracking across the black surface. Then, shapes, massive and writhing just beneath, glowing eyes like lanterns staring upward in time with the song. For a moment he wasn't in the lighthouse at all. He was drifting above the water, weightless, his body gone. He heard a voice separate from the choir, deep and close, whispering through the song. "Come down, join us, light the sea." The spiral staircase wakes. Daniel gasped, dragging himself back to the reality of the keeper's quarters. His body felt heavy, his limbs sluggish, like he'd been underwater too long. The choir still sang outside, relentless. And then came the sound inside. The spiral staircase groaned. Each step flexed as though weight pressed down on it again. But this time, it wasn't slow and patient. It was quicker, urgent. Step, step, step. Coming down. Daniel grabbed the pouch of salt and stumbled to his feet, heart pounding. His flashlight beam flickered across the stairwell, catching only the first few steps. Shadows swirled above like smoke caught in a jar. The knocking resumed. Harder now. Not just 3 times, continuous, rapid, pounding like fists demanding entry. Knock, 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 knock. The wall shuddered. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Daniel poured another handful of salt across the doorway, his hands shaking so violently, half of it scattered uselessly across the floor. He didn't care, just needed a line, something, anything. The keeper returns. The lantern flame above flared violently. The light burst through the cracks in the floorboards, glowing white-hot for a split second before dimming again. And with that light came a shadow at the foot of the staircase. A man's outline, thin, gaunt, shoulders slouched, arms too long. The keeper. Daniel's mouth dried, his voice cracked into the recorder, barely above a whisper. "He's here. Oh God, he's on the stairs." The shadow moved, but not toward Daniel. It lingered just outside the salt line at the threshold, twitching like it was straining against an invisible leash. Its head tilted sideways, unnaturally sharp, and when it opened its mouth, the choir outside bent with it, like every voice in the sea belonged to him. "Carry it, light the sea." The shattering moment. Daniel backed against the wall, clutching the pouch like a weapon. The flame above dimmed again, casting the room in long, trembling shadows. The keeper's outline stretched across the floor, long fingers reaching toward him, stopping just inches short of the salt line. And then, one of the glass panes shattered. The wind screamed through the tower, spraying salt from the floor, scattering it into gaps. The line broke. The choir roared, the sea answered, and the keeper stepped 1 foot inside.
The air inside the keeper's room turned thick, syrupy, every breath a fight. The broken salt line glared up at Daniel like a wound. The shadow in the doorway swelled, stretched, then stepped inside. The keeper's figure wasn't solid, not yet. He shimmered like heat rising off asphalt, his edges flickering between flesh and mist. His face remained hidden in shadow, but the shape of his mouth, gaping, open too wide, was visible as it whispered in rhythm with the sea outside. The choir surged, louder than ever. Every pane of glass in the lantern chamber rattled. Every nail in the wood groaned. The sea itself seemed to sing through the bones of the lighthouse. Daniel stumbled backward, knocking the chair to the ground. His flashlight sputtered, beam cutting across the keeper's form. For a split second, Daniel saw eyes, sunken, wet, glowing faintly like the lights under the waves. Not human eyes. Not anymore. The figure twitched forward. The keeper speaks. Daniel pressed his recorder to his mouth, whispering, desperate. The keeper he's here, inside. I don't know if he's real. I don't know what I'm looking at. The voice interrupted him. Not on the recorder, not outside. In the room. Low, guttural, vibrating through the floorboards. It will climb. Daniel's head snapped up. The keeper's jaw moved out of sync with the words. The voice wasn't coming from him. It was coming from below, from the very stones of the tower. The floor trembled, dust rained from the ceiling, and outside, the ocean surged higher, waves slamming against the rocks with furious rhythm. The lanterns pulse. Above them, the lantern flared. The flame grew brighter, white-hot, bending unnaturally sideways toward the sea. It pulsed in steady rhythm. 3 bursts, then pause. 3 bursts, then pause. The choir shifted key, their song turning sharper, hungrier. Daniel clutched the pouch of salt tighter, but it felt smaller now, inadequate. He tried to speak, to demand answers, but all that came out was a broken whisper. What do you want from me? The keeper's shadow twitched closer. Carry it. The circle reforged. Panic snapped Daniel awake. He threw himself to the ground, scattering salt in trembling handfuls, trying to close the broken circle. His sweat made it clump, stick to his palms. The line smudged more than sealed. But the shadow hesitated, twitching violently at the threshold of the circle. It clawed at the air, jaw unhinged in a silent scream, eyes burning brighter. Daniel poured the last of the pouch, sealing one side. The shadow convulsed, half inside, half out. It howled, not with sound, but with vibration. The entire tower shivered like a struck bell. The choir outside shrieked in dissonant fury. The sea slammed against the island so hard the ground itself lurched. And just as suddenly, silence. The keeper froze. His outline flickered. Then he snapped back toward the staircase, jerking upward in a blur, vanishing into the lantern chamber. The flame dimmed, pulsed once, then went still. The aftermath. Daniel collapsed on the floor, chest heaving, sweat freezing against his skin. His ears rang with the ghost of the choir, though the sea outside had quieted. He whispered into the recorder, voice raw and shaking. Hour 7. The keeper crossed the salt line. I forced him back. Barely. The lantern is controlling the sea. It's calling something. Something that wants in. He looked at the broken logbook on the desk, pages fluttering in the draft. His eyes caught a single line, scrawled in thick ink. If the bell tolls, the sea will climb. Daniel swallowed hard. He realized he hadn't heard the bell yet. Not once. And the night
was far from over.
Daniel sat slumped in the keeper's chair, recorder still warm in his hand. His throat ached from breathing too fast, too shallow. The salt circle was patched, but barely. Every grain on the floor felt like a sandcastle against the tide. The tower had gone silent, too silent. The choir outside had stopped mid-song, like a hand had smothered their voices all at once. The sea still churned, but no more eyes glowed beneath it. For the first time in hours, the ocean looked dark again. Daniel should have felt relief. Instead, his chest felt heavier. The quiet was worse, because quiet meant waiting. And then it came. A low toll. Not the delicate clink of the lantern chain, not the knocking in threes. This was deeper, older. A bell so massive it couldn't belong to the lighthouse. It shook the glass panes, rattled the spiral staircase, reverberated straight into Daniel's ribs. Boom! The bell's toll hung in the air long after the sound ended, vibrating the marrow of his bones. The sea answers. Daniel staggered to the window. His flashlight was weak, nearly dead, but it didn't matter. He didn't need light. The ocean glowed. Not faint pulses now, not eyes blinking in the deep. The whole sea seemed to ignite from below, blue-green light boiling upward through the waves. The water itself looked alive, veins of light coursing through it. And with each toll of the bell, the light grew brighter. Boom! Waves rose higher and higher, smashing against the cliffs, spraying mist that glowed faintly like it carried sparks. The rocks groaned as if alive, the ground quaking beneath the lighthouse. Daniel whispered into the recorder, his voice shredded. "Hour 8. The bell has started. The sea, it's waking up. God help me, it's climbing the island." The first rise. The fog outside thickened, curling like hands around the lighthouse. Daniel squinted through the broken glass, and his heart nearly stopped. Something was rising out of the water. At first, he thought it was just the tide slamming against the rocks, but then he saw shapes within it, pillars of water stretching upward, holding form too long to be natural. One bent forward against the cliffside, smashing into the rocks like an arm. Another followed, curling higher, fingers of foam curling over stone. Not waves, not tides, limbs. The sea itself was climbing. The Keeper returns. The spiral staircase shuttered. Daniel whipped around just in time to see the lantern flare again. The flame didn't just burn, it roared, white-hot, hissing like oil poured on fire. Shadows twisted against the walls, stretching, convulsing. The Keeper's outline appeared once more, jerking violently as though yanked up by invisible strings. He clung to the lantern chain with one hand, head snapping toward Daniel, jaw unhinged in a scream the recorder captured as static. It climbs. Ring again. Ring again. The bell tolled once more. Boom! The sea answered. The limbs of water stretched higher, spilling across the cliffs, fingers of glowing foam dragging across the island like claws. The breaking point. Daniel stumbled back, whispering into the recorder, his voice on the verge of madness. If the bell keeps tolling, the sea will swallow this island. The salt isn't holding. The Keeper isn't keeping. He's summoning. Another toll. The whole tower shook, groaning under the weight of the sound. The spiral staircase swayed, bolts shrieking against stone. The lantern swung wildly, casting light across Daniel's pale face, across the Keeper's hollow eyes, across the walls, now bleeding salt. And outside, through the shattered window, Daniel saw it. A head. Massive.
shaped like a man's but blurred, shifting as if carved from water and light. It rose just high enough for him to see its glowing eyes staring straight into the lantern chamber. The choir returned, not with song, but with screams.
The 9th hour began with the sound of the sea breaking the island. The ground beneath the lighthouse lurched violently, pitching Daniel to his knees. He clutched the desk for balance, his recorder clattering across the floor. Outside, the bell tolled again, deep, resonant, impossibly loud, shaking the entire tower like a tuning fork. Boom! The window frame cracked, glass shattering inward, shards skittering across the floor like ice. Daniel crawled to the window, heart in his throat. The island was gone, or rather, it was going. Water surged across the land in great luminous sheets, glowing veins writhing within it. What had once been solid rock was now drowning beneath a tide that rose like a living wall. Trees bent sideways, dragged under. The dock where the captain had left him was already submerged, vanishing in seconds. And through the glowing waves, eyes burned upward, hundreds of them staring directly at the lighthouse. The keeper's call. The spiral staircase screamed as metal tore against stone. Daniel spun. The keeper was descending again, his shadow stretched, body spasming like a puppet yanked by too many strings. His lantern swayed violently, flame roaring white. Ring again, again, again. His voice echoed through the chamber, overlapping itself, as though more than one throat spoke in unison. Daniel stumbled backward, nearly slipping on the broken salt line. "No," he rasped, his own voice hoarse. "You're summoning it. Whatever it is, you're bringing it here." The keeper twitched closer, features finally flickering into view in the lantern's light. His skin looked bloated, waterlogged, mottled blue. Salt crystals encrusted his beard. His clothes clung wet to a skeletal frame. His eyes glowed with the same unnatural light as the sea outside. He wasn't keeping anything away. He was the sea's herald, the sea's limbs. A crash shook the tower as something massive struck the base. The lighthouse groaned, dust spilling from the ceiling, bolts snapping loose. Daniel scrambled back to the window and saw it clearly this time. A colossal arm of water, glowing veins pulsing within it, slammed into the rocks, fingers curling into the island like a hand grasping a toy. Another followed, wrapping around the side of the lighthouse itself. The entire structure tilted, floor slanting beneath Daniel's boots. The recorder clicked on by accident as it skittered across the floor, capturing his frantic gasps. "The sea, oh God, the sea is climbing. It's got arms. It's pulling itself onto the island." The bell tolled once more. Boom. This time, the sound cracked the walls. A jagged split tore down the plaster, revealing salt veins glowing faintly in the stone itself. The keeper's demand. The keeper's shadow loomed over Daniel, reaching out with waterlogged hands. Drops fell from his fingers, though he wasn't solid, every splash sizzling as acid on the floor. "Carry it, light the sea, join the choir." Daniel scrambled to the desk, ripping drawers open, searching for anything, a flare, a weapon, another pouch of salt. His hands closed around a small tin can, rusted but intact. He tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside, rock salt, rough, jagged, sharp. He flung a handful at the keeper. The crystals hissed as they struck, the figure convulsing, flickering in and out like static. The lantern above shrieked, flame bending sideways. The sea outside screamed with it. The choir in his head. Daniel collapsed against the wall, pressing his palms to his skull.
The choir wasn't just outside anymore, it was inside him. 1,000 voices sang and screamed in his head, pushing memories aside, replacing them with alien images. The keeper, younger, standing proud in the lantern room, writing his logs in neat script. The first time the bell tolled, his hands pressed against his ears, blood running from his nose. The moment he broke, stepping willingly into the circle, letting the sea take him. His final command: light the sea. Daniel screamed, but it came out as laughter. His body shook, his vision blurred, his mind nearly breaking under the weight of so many voices crammed into one skull. The final climb. The lighthouse swayed again. Outside, the sea's colossal head rose higher, eyes blazing like suns through the fog. Its mouth opened, though it wasn't a mouth, just a gash of light ripping across water. And from it came the toll of the bell itself, not from the tower, not from the lantern, from the sea. Boom! The tower buckled, floorboards split, salt dust filled the air like snow. Daniel grabbed his recorder one last time, voice trembling, half choked with fear. If anyone finds this, it's not a storm, it's not the sea, it's alive. The bell, God help me, the bell belongs to it. The keeper lunged, lantern swinging, flame flaring brighter than ever before. And outside, the sea wrapped both arms around the tower, pulling, dragging it down toward the glowing maw that waited below.
The lighthouse screamed as the sea wrenched it sideways. Bolts snapped like gunfire, beams cracked, and Daniel was thrown against the wall. His flashlight died on impact, plunging the chamber into darkness. Only the lantern above still burned, its flame flaring unnaturally bright. The keeper loomed in the glow, his waterlogged body twitching like a marionette. His eyes, those glowing, drowned orbs, fixed on Daniel. Ring again. Join the choir. Light the sea. The bell outside boomed once more, deeper, longer, vibrating every stone of the island. Boom. The sound rattled Daniel's teeth, shook his skull, made his vision blur. Outside, the ocean's limbs pulled tighter, the glowing head rising higher. The maw of light yawned wide, waiting to swallow the tower whole. The keeper's demand. Daniel staggered to his feet, recorder still clutched in one trembling hand. His voice was cracked, nearly gone. If I ring again, if I let this continue, it takes everything, the island, the town, the coast, maybe the whole world. The keeper's shadow flickered violently, mouth opening wider, jaw unhinged beyond human limits. His voice was not one, but many, 1,000 throats roaring in chorus. Carry it, ring, now. The lantern swung, chain screaming, flame roaring brighter than any sun. The choice. Daniel's eyes fell to the pouch of rock salt, nearly empty, to the logbook on the desk, final words scrawled in madness. If the bell tolls, the sea will climb. And then, on the inside cover, words he hadn't seen before, faded, written smaller than the rest. If you silence the flame, the bell will rest. His stomach clenched. His mind screamed at him, but his hand moved anyway. He reached up, grasping the iron chain of the lantern. The heat seared his skin, the flame hissing like it recognized him. The keeper shrieked, lurching forward, clawing the air as if to stop him. The sea roared, waves smashing into the tower so hard, the floor pitched like a ship. The glowing head outside screamed without a mouth. Daniel yanked. The lantern extinguished. The lantern shattered in his hand, glass exploded, flame vanishing in a hiss of salt and smoke. The chamber plunged into absolute darkness. For one frozen second, there was silence. The keeper convulsed violently, his body splitting into spray, dissolving into 1,000 droplets that rained down and vanished into the floor. Outside, the bell tolled, one final deafening strike. Boom. Then silence. The sea froze. The glowing head sank back beneath the waves, its light dimming, swallowed by the black water. The arms of ocean released the tower, crashing back into the depths. The choir cut off mid-scream, leaving only the natural crash of waves. The lighthouse groaned, battered, broken, but it still stood. The aftermath. Daniel collapsed on the floor, his hands scorched, lungs raw, ears ringing with the phantom echo of the bell. The recorder clicked faintly beside him. "This is Daniel Price. Final log. Blackthorn Light isn't haunted. It's a prison. The keeper wasn't keeping the sea out, he was calling it in. And the bell belongs to it. If anyone finds this, know this. Don't light the lantern. Don't ring the bell. Don't answer the sea." His voice trailed off, the recorder's battery giving its last breath. Daniel lay there in the silence, staring at the empty space where the lantern had hung. For the first time all night, the ocean outside sounded like just water. But deep inside, beneath the floor, he swore he heard one last knock. 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 And then, nothing. Epilogue. When the supply boat returned the next morning, the captain found the lighthouse door ajar, the salt line smeared across the floor, and Daniel's recorder lying beside the desk. Daniel himself was gone. No blood, no struggle, no sign of where he'd gone. Just his voice, captured in static, whispering on the tape. Light the sea.